And I think just to start by thanking our co-hosts, the Centre for China and Globalization, and obviously also the Beijing's Leading Group Office for the two zones. So I think for bringing us together today on such an important topic. And I do want to acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Ambassador Geertz of the Netherlands. The Netherlands has been a huge supporter of Agenda 2030, but also particularly on the work of my agency in UNFPA on sexual and reproductive health and rights and gender equality. So I have 3 points and 3 examples today, if time allows. So firstly, if we're thinking about leveraging multi-stakeholder partnerships for sustainable development, the fact is that the involvement of the private sector is not optional, it is essential if we are to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. An estimate in 2020 was it will cost an additional $4.2 trillion per year in financing if all developing countries are to achieve the SDGs in full by 2030. And we already know that official development assistance, that the national government resources of those development countries cannot fund that gap. And that was why in 2015, after the Conference on Financing for Development in Addis Ababa, the General Assembly formally recognised that private sector business activity, investment, expertise and innovation can all be major drivers of sustainable development when done in a way that ensures inclusive growth. So for the UN, it's important to know that the way that we engage with the private sector in terms of advancing the SDGs has evolved considerably since 2015. So last year, the UN Secretary General's Office issued a report on partnerships that recognised that in order to accelerate progress towards the SDGs, we need to move away from a sort of one-off donation-based partnership between the UN and private sector to a much more strategic, multi-sectoral, multi-member partnership that focuses on innovation, scalability and impact, and that these partnerships need to work over a longer time period rather than just a single short-term event if they're to have sustained impact. And in the UN, we're expecting to see this type of partnership to more than double over the next 5 years. And when we think about the role Chinese private sector business and finance can play in supporting the SDGs in China and beyond China, the scene is already set for greater involvement. So with the Global Development Initiative announced last year by President Xi, China has reinforced its commitment to multilateralism and to accelerating the achievement of the SDGs globally. At the same time, there's clearly a lot of interest amongst the Chinese private sector to be engaged in supporting the SDGs. Almost 600 Chinese companies have signed up to the United Nations Global Compact, which enables companies to contribute to the SDGs both nationally and globally. And when we look at the Dakar Action Plan from last year's Forum for Africa-China Cooperation, often referred to as FOCAC, we see that the governments of China and the African countries calling on Chinese business sector to support sustainable development in Africa by supporting communities, localizing job opportunities, and helping to strengthen public services and address environmental protection. So when we think about these multi-sectoral stakeholder partnerships, I wanted to just give 3 examples from the work that we do as UNFPA around the world. And so, these are private sector multi-sectoral partnerships that advance the SDG 3 on health, but particularly are focused on target 3.1 to reduce global maternal mortality ratio. And I wanted to start with Merck for Mothers. So this is an example of a long-term, focused global initiative launched by a single private sector company, Merck, which has lasted over 10 years and continues today. And it's set out with a specific aim to reduce maternal deaths and improve maternal care. And importantly, although it's a global initiative, it works with local partners to develop local solutions across many countries and communities. And so, for example, in the Philippines, Merck for Mothers works with my team, so UNFPA, and a network of Filipino businesses to introduce workplace health programs that supports vulnerable female workers with information and services that have helped these women to improve their sexual and reproductive health, but importantly, has also helped companies to reduce absenteeism and staff turnover. In Mongolia, we have a geographically focused multi-sectoral partnership that's brought together 3 UN agencies, the Ministry of Health, the Australian Embassy, and the Oyu Tolgoi Mining Company, again to provide health information and services to vulnerable women and young people living in a high-need region, very often in poverty and with low health outputs. And this partnership's continued over 4 years and really has had a measurable impact, not just on the individuals that have received services and information, but on the overall well-being of the communities as a whole. And finally, I wanted to highlight the Kenya Sustainable Development Goal Partnership Platform, as this is really considered an excellent example of leveraging multi-sectoral partnerships to address the SDGs, and was actually developed by the current resident coordinator here in China when he was in Kenya. And this platform brings together the UN, the government of Kenya, and a wide range of national and multinational private sector partners, such as Huawei and Philips, Chinese and Dutch multinationals respectively, with a focus firstly on primary health care, but now really broadening out to address a number of key SDGs linked to government priorities. And I really would encourage everybody to go and look up this initiative online, because I think this is really where multi-sectoral partnerships with the UN will be heading in the coming years. Thank you very much.